Financial literacy is a powerful tool for reducing social and economic inequality, and it's a skill everyone deserves. Join this three-part workshop series designed to build financial confidence and strengthen your practical money skills. Across the series, you will learn how to create a realistic, workable budget, assess your financial well-being, build a financial vision to guide your future. Associate Professor Michelle Cull, our facilitator today, is an expert in accounting and financial planning at Western Sydney University. With more than 2 decades of teaching experience, their research focuses on financial literacy, ethics, trust, and education, and aligns strongly with the United Nations SDGs. Michelle has led numerous initiatives supporting financial literacy across diverse communities, including migrants, students, and women in trades. Today we have workshop 1, budgeting basics, and we have 2 more workshops. Second workshop is on next Monday, 9th March, on your financial well-being, and workshop 3, your financial vision, is on 16th March. So welcome, Professor Kerr, and all yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and welcome everybody. Good morning. It's great to have you here on board. And now just noting that this session is being recorded, but I will be asking you to share some of your thoughts as we move through the presentation today. So feel free to do so, or not if you're not happy to share. But it's possible for you still to learn quite a lot just by listening in and taking some notes. Might I also ask you just to note whether you have your audio on or off. So if someone else is presenting, if you could please have your audio off, but feel free to also make sure that you turn it on if you do ask a question. So you can use chat for questions, or if you'd like to use the raised hand symbol in your menu at the bottom of Zoom, we can have you actually ask a question using your microphone. So I am hoping for this to be a little bit more interactive today so that you are engaged in what's happening, and hopefully you will learn something really valuable. So just to start off, I suppose I was interested to find out maybe some of the reasons why you have registered to attend today. Obviously, you're looking to learn a little bit more about budgeting, and this is a very basic workshop on budgeting, so we will start from the beginning. But I just wondered if anybody would like to share maybe their thoughts on budgeting and what they're hoping to get out of today's session. So feel free to pop that in the chat, or if you'd like to pop your microphone on and let us know. Is anybody wanting to share?
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Chow. Good morning.
Hi, Chow. Have you got a question for us?
Yes, the reason I joined this workshop is because I noticed my financial literacy is quite limited. And then I feel like lots of all the everything is getting more and more expensive, and then um and workload is increasing, but saving is not increasing that much. Yeah. Yeah, so that's why I feel we need to have improve our financial literacy so we can have better future plan. Yeah.
Yes, no, that's a great reason. And I can see some people have also put their reasons in the chat there. So helping to help their children understand how to budget better, and also a single mum studying full time. Yes, money is always tight. And as we know, we have got this cost of living, prices just keep increasing, but it doesn't feel like our income is keeping up with it. And so it can be very difficult to manage. So that's why we need a budget. So I do hope that you learned something. Please feel free to pop questions in the chat as we go through so that I can make sure that you get the most from today. But thank you for sharing that with us, for those of you who did do that. So what we're going to cover in today's workshop we're going to always, I like to look at our relationship with money, all right? Because a budget is a great tool. And as many of you have said, in terms of financial literacy, this can be really helpful, but we still need to have the right attitude. So a study that I undertook many years ago actually found that there was a difference between people who had the knowledge of, say, how to build a budget versus those who actually had the attitude that where they used a budget. So what we tend to find is that people have all the best intentions, but if we can't get your relationship with money right, a budget can still be very difficult to help you in your financial journey. So we are going to have a little look at that, and you might want to share some things at that stage. Then we'll look at, well, why do we have a budget? And then how we classify our income, and then we'll spend a bit of time on expenses and categorizing our expenses. And most importantly, as part of the budget process, then we will look at needs versus wants. So this can really help us when we're exploring how we can maybe save some costs. And then we will see how we can factor in our goals into our budgeting journey so that we can try to actually budget for some longer term expenses, not just our day-to-day expenses. Then we'll go through the budgeting process with an example, and then hopefully you will also get an opportunity to start building your own budget, and then we will look at how you review a budget and some other budgeting tips. So just in terms of your attitude and your relationship with money, I just want you to think about your attitude to money for a minute. And, some people, and I know even with my own children, they are very different. Some people like to spend everything as soon as they earn it. Sometimes people spend everything that they earn, but if they have money given to them, they tend not to spend it, or vice versa. So other people are great at saving, and they save everything and very rarely spend any of their money. And then others might have a bit of both. So I just wonder, how do you spend your money? Do you decide how much you're going to spend, or what is your attitude? Are you more likely to spend money when you're at the shops? Is it hard for you to rein in that control? What sorts of things do you spend your money on? What sorts of things motivate you to save? So this is an important aspect of the budgeting process, is just to be aware of your own natural attitudes and awareness to money. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be like that, but it's just understanding how your behavior may impact on your budget. Is there anything that anybody wants to share at this stage?
I'll jump in and share something.
Yes, thanks, Anissa.
Hey, so I guess I've got 4 kids, and I grew up the oldest of 6. So I think being the oldest, I just really was very money conscious. So even now, I try to get my kids to when they get birthday presents, or when they get money, at certain times of the year, to try and think about portioning a bit of it to save, and then keeping some of it to spend. So I'm trying to kind of build that awareness, and I don't personally spend a lot of money, but I do want to help my kids manage how they spend theirs. So I try to get them to keep a bit for big things down the track, and have a little bit for things that they want to spend on, so they can be conscious of how much they're using.
Yeah, no, that sounds fantastic, because, I mean, we don't want to be saving everything and not enjoying life either if we do work hard for it. But I think, yeah, instilling in your children from a young age that they do need to save some is very important. And, the research has shown that, in fact, things that happen from a very young age in relation to money can actually affect our attitude to money later in life. So by the age of 7, children tend to already have those early money memories that do impact them later in life. So in terms of studying the brain, they have found that they money memories are stored just like other sorts of memories, and they can invoke a lot of emotions. So if you were, when you're younger, if say, for example, you're encouraged to save, that's something that will continue in life. But if you are made ashamed of the way that you spend money, for example, that can also impact people later in life. And there's an example that I heard recently by a money coach at a conference who was saying that one of her clients, as an example, one of her clients had come to her because she had a lot of issues with her spending. And when they got down to the bottom of it, that actually came down to her client's earliest money memory being one of when they were on holidays, and she was one of several children, and they were all able to choose a different ice cream when they were on holidays. And her brothers and sisters chose pretty stock standard type ice creams, paddle pops, and those sorts of things, whereas she had chosen a drumstick. And her father said at the time, "Oh, of course, you would choose the most expensive ice cream, the drumstick." And she started to feel shame at that point, and it had actually carried through in her life. And these money memories, because they do carry with them so much emotion, they can actually cause trauma later in life. So we have to be careful of the language that we use with our children as well. But also, if you're here today and you're learning about budgeting, it is something that you can try to pass on to your children as well, because if they can learn to budget, then they can manage their own money and they won't be relying on different things that have been said to them. They actually can take control of their money from an earlier age. And this can also start with giving pocket money and things like that, the way that we reward our children for doing maybe odd jobs around the house. But we also need to be conscious that when we're doing that, that we're very careful around what we choose to reward our, our children for in that respect. Because other studies have actually shown that some socialization has occurred where, for example, the boys in the family tend to be given jobs around the house, like mowing the lawn, for example, where they will get paid more than other jobs that are often given to daughters for folding, washing, and doing the dishes or setting the table and things like that. So we don't want to set our children up from, a young age, them thinking that there's that different system based on gender, for example. So it's just something to be aware of. And if we're aware of these things, then we can make sure that we make the better decisions. So I've got a comment.
Yes, yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought I'll read the comments. Chiavo Chu said grocery shopping and travel expense and study fees, her main budget goes. And Miritia, she has put an excellent, interesting comment that she recently read that poor people spend, rich people save, but poor people spend on survival. Rich people don't have to survive financially.
Yes, yes.
That's
Well,
like this.
what we all people are different. So I suppose that may be the case in some instances, but maybe not others. I would also tend to argue that rich people are rich because they don't spend. So sometimes it's not about how much you earn. Sometimes it's about how much you spend or don't spend. So a lot of rich people have not, I suppose, wasted their money. They have been careful in how they spend their money, and that's why that we call them rich, perhaps. But other things are that people tend to get used to a certain standard of living. So there was a study done a few years ago around what salary you'd have to earn for you to be happy. And they put it at around $75,000 a year. That was a few years ago, though. And a sort of the study showed that once you exceeded that salary, that in fact you weren't, your happiness didn't increase as quickly as the salary increased because you already had everything that you needed. So sometimes rich people can actually spend more because they have everything else that they need, and then they spend everything else. So, I mean, it does depend once again on each individual people. But regarding about poor people spending on survival, well, yes, a larger proportion of their income would be spent on their needs, which is something that we will look at as part of this budgeting presentation. But also a study that I had undertaken with Tracy West, we found that in fact, no matter how much financial literacy some people have, if they have such a small income that they're below the poverty line, it doesn't matter how good their financial literacy is, it's still not going to help them. So we need to address the income to help those people, bring them above the poverty line and be able to actually utilize their financial literacy.
So let me share my personal experience because I born and raised in India, but moved to New Zealand and from there moved to Australia, Perth, then to New South Wales and different places with the 2 young children. We moved to New Zealand. So first few years of our moving to New Zealand life, we were very, very strict about because one income, 2 growing children, rent and everything. We were very careful about how much money we spend. Then they got into university and exam. By that time, 2 of us, both me and my husband got the job. Still, we couldn't afford many things that others afforded, like socializing and going, things like that. But we had to put them to university. Once they are out of university and they got their own job, then we started spending a bit more. For example, having not expensive, bit more comfortable things in life, traveling. Then we started traveling once in 2 years, traveling in different places. Now, because they started earning, they're not giving us money we don't expect. But then we got a bit comfortable. Now we travel every year. See, that is the progress we did, but it took us 38 years to reach to that level. Just as an example.
Yes, that's a really good example of what we were talking about. Thank you. So what we might do now is I'll just move on to the next stage. So as we're talking about different financial behaviors of people, what can impact on your attitude to money? Well, this is what the research has shown. So for some people, it's numeracy skills. So if people are not comfortable with their mathematics skills, sometimes it just scares people off and they're like, they hear the word budget and they want to run away. They're like, oh, that involves doing calculations and maths and, I'm really bad at maths. But in fact, some people aren't as bad at maths as what they think. Sometimes it's once again just something that they have had an experience with in the past. But also budgeting actually isn't any difficult maths at all. It's just a simple adding and subtracting. It's not anything more than that. So it's something that maybe people, if they try, they rather than run away from, they'll actually realize that it isn't as bad as what they think when it comes to mathematics. But it does impact on people's attitude to money more generally. So the other thing is knowledge and exposure to parents' financial behaviours. So Anissa, some of those things that you were talking about, kids can also learn a lot from how their parents might manage money. And in fact, one other research project that I was involved with, we looked at why people became financial planners. And all of the respondents that were financial planners all became financial planners because they wanted to help people. But some of these people wanted to help people because they actually saw their parents struggling or not managing money very well. And they saw what happened with that. So they didn't want to see other people go through that. And therefore they became a financial planner. Other people saw that their parents managed money very well or might have even had a financial planner themselves that helped. So that's why they wanted to go and help people. So knowledge and exposure to parents' financial behaviours can also impact on how people view money, as well as other beliefs. So it might be even cultural values can also impact on attitudes to money, and personal values. So whether someone's more materialistic or more having a short-term focus versus a long-term focus. Because often for saving, for example, you need to be able to delay gratification. You need to be able to have a bit more of a long-term focus so that you can be motivated to save for those things. For some of the other things that might impact on your attitude, we've also got a lot of pressure in society now to keep up with one another. We see things on social media, for example, or advertising, or in magazines and so on, where people are doing all these exciting things, looking great, going traveling, buying, new cars, having great experiences. And so there's a lot of pressure for everyone to keep up with them. So that can actually cause people to maybe spend money on things that they wouldn't otherwise spend money on, or think that some things are maybe more important than others. Then, of course, addictions can have a big impact on one's attitude to money, because, well, the money is feeding these addictions. There's nothing really left for anything else. So that can be something that can make budgeting for people with addictions very difficult, because their addiction will come first. So that may impact on people that way. And then, of course, previous life experiences, as we have discussed, even from a very early age, can impact on one's attitude to money. So what I'd like you to think about now is, what does your relationship with money look like? So I've got some images in on the slide there that I've just chosen. I usually have a box of photo cards, and I ask people to go through and pick one that represents their relationship with money. Or you might have a different image in your mind that represents your relationship with money. So I wonder, do any of those images resonate with you, or did you want to? I don't know if you can. I think you can share emojis, but I don't think you can share other images in the chat here. But yes, if Anissa, the road represents travel. Okay, yes. So that's it. That's representing your relationship with money. For others, that picture of the road may actually show them that their finances are on track, maybe, or that they've got a goal that they're aiming for. Anybody else? Oh, drowning, not waving.
Yes.
Oh, that's a funny one. Okay, so so the life boy there, yeah. So drowning, not waiting. So you might need a little bit of help. Okay, the hourglass. Ah, yes. So did you want to explain that, why you chose the hourglass?
Because money is always, it's there is a big pot or whatever is there, but it drains. It just goes. It's not forever. As you spend, it's going to diminish. There is no way. You can substitute, but still it is going for various things in life. So, yeah, just like people like us, unless you are rich and you born in that way and you inherited, it's a different case.
Hello, can I share? Yes.
Yes.
For me, I feel like the second top one with like a lot of confused. that, that one looks like investment for me, because I feel investment include a lot of factors and also uncertainty. So that makes me feel a bit confused. Yeah. But for the road one, I feel it's more like a short-term goal for me. It's very clear. I can manage. I can think clearly. But for long-term investment, I feel a bit like confused. Yeah.
Yes. I'm sure many other people feel the same as you, especially with the economic and global conditions at the moment. I think a lot of people become even more confused with all that noise, and wonder how that's going to impact on investments. And we have another Ka- Karthikeya, the goal. Oh yes, the soccer goal as money can often be summarized as a target. Yes, yes, I can see that. As especially if there are goals that you have that you want to achieve later. Or some people just simply like having money in the bank, and they have a goal and they want to reach, a certain amount of saving that makes them feel more safe, can I say. So, but today we're not going to talk so much about investments. We might touch on it as a goal, but we're not going to get into the detail of investments. And it's not part of well, it doesn't form a large part of our three-part series, but it is something perhaps we can look at doing another presentation on down the track. So for those of you who may not be aware, Western Sydney also has a micro-credential on personal finance that you can undertake, which is undertaken at your own pace and online. And that actually has a module on investments. So I'll just put that out there. If you want more information, I'm sure you can contact us later and we can provide you with that. Okay, well, might move along. Let's see. All right, so what are your good money habits and what habits do you want to work on? And you'll see why this is all important very soon. We'll get down to actually building a budget. So does anyone have any good money habits? Or has anyone started doing a bit of a budget? Or do you have some particular habits you want to work on? So I've popped two images up here just for a bit of fun. So of course one could be seen as a good money habit, so having some savings that you're building, and others it could be seen as maybe a habit you want to work on where you don't want to just keep spending every time you go out. Okay, so saving for travel, yeah.
Meritia says, I have done lots of budgets in the past, but it only takes one wobble and then it all falls over.
Yes, yes. Okay, so that's right. That comes back to, I suppose, our attitude and it's normal. That's human behavior. But I suppose with having a budget, what's really good is that you know that you had a wobble, so you can then try to fix that and then get back to staying on track again. So it gives you a bit of a baseline to start with. But sometimes when we build budgets, we're a little bit too optimistic. I'm a very optimistic person, so I understand that sometimes when you put budgets together, you think that you're going to be able to have this huge surplus and you might not realize what you actually spend your money on. So sometimes it can start with an understanding your own behaviors and your actual spending patterns before you build your budget so that, you actually know what you're spending your money on. And yes, Anissa, shopping around to get comparisons. Absolutely. That's really good. You don't want to be rushing into those big decisions. So even though you might have had a budget and been really good saving for a goal, once you've got those savings there, you don't want to waste them and just go out and buy that big ticket item. You want to make sure you do shop around, and that can take a bit of time to do that. Yes, and thinking about wants and needs. So that's really important because sometimes we think that we need things that we actually don't really need. All right, so this brings us back to budgeting. So why do we want to budget? So it does help to ensure that you can meet all of your financial commitments. So that's the first reason why we might want to budget is particularly if we do have limited funds, you want to make sure that you are able to pay your bills when they come in and have a roof over your head, be able to, to eat, have electricity, these basic needs. So that's the main reason why we want to budget. But then, of course, we also want to use a budget to help set or meet a savings goal. So we might not want to have a budget just to be meeting our everyday expenses, but we might want to have a budget so that we can make sure we can meet our financial commitments, but also work out how much we can put aside for a savings goal, whether that be for something like maybe a new car or a holiday, maybe even a deposit on a house. So, or there could be many other savings goals. It can also help you, we say take control of your finances and reduce stress because you actually know where your money is going. You know where maybe you might be able to save some money once you actually see it in a budget and you start putting pen to paper actually does highlight where your money is going. And sometimes that can be really shocking, but you can get control of that then because you are aware of where your money is going. And then, of course, look at reducing the spending on the things that maybe you don't need and looking more at the things that you do need or that you do really want. So budgeting is a useful step towards making wiser financial decisions. So well done for being here today. I really do hope that this is going to be helpful for you. So I've just broken down the budgeting process up into 6 simple steps to try to make it easier. And I know this is very basic, but it's also really important that we follow each of the steps. And we will go through each one in a little bit more detail. So of course, the first step is we need to know how much income you have coming in. So today we're not going to go looking at working out the tax that you've paid and all of that sort of stuff. We only keep it fairly simple because, of course, once you start getting a little bit more complex with how you spend your money, that can actually affect your total income because like we hear a lot about capital gains tax and negative gearing and all this with houses, for example. So people with investment properties may have their income from wages, but they may also have income from rent. But then because of negative gearing where they're claiming deductions on their rental income, they may actually end up paying less tax. So their after-tax total income may be very different. Today, we're just going to talk about our after-tax total income. We're not looking at working out the tax. I'm just sort of basing it more on, say, something like wages that you might be receiving and where you know what your after-tax amount is. So it's just something to start with. But I suppose that's where the budgeting process can start to get a little bit more complicated when you do start to have other financial assets and other financial income. So then we're going to, and I will go through each step. So just as a summary though, we will then work out our money out that's required for your necessary expenses or your needs. Then we will look at estimating your expenses on your other non-essential items, so the things that you want or don't need. Then we will look at your financial goals, so what you want to achieve in the next year, 2 or 5 years, or even more long term. And then we can work out if you have a surplus or a deficit and make any adjustments. So 4 and 5 work very closely together because what we might want to do is if we're looking at a financial goal, we might want to work out, well, how much do we need to save to reach that financial goal? We can put that into our budget and then work out if we have any money left over, or you can work out if you're in a surplus or a deficit and then go from there and work out, well, how much is left for you to be able to save for those financial goals. So if we look at step 1, the money in, so we do need to consider all types of income. So you might have income from employment, and that would include things like your overtime and bonuses, but we don't want to overestimate it because if you're not guaranteed of your overtime and bonuses, for example, you don't want to be spending it before you've earned it. Then you might have maybe some Centrelink benefits, so that might be a parenting payment. You could be operating a business, so that may be income coming from a business, and that can make budgeting a little bit more tricky because you might not know exactly what your income would be, so it's not as regular. So we have to make an estimate there, and then there'll be more adjustments needed to your budget as you move throughout the year. Income from savings. So, if interest rates are going up, you might start to actually receive some interest from your savings. So that would be nice. So you can count that in your budget. And income from other investments. So if you're, as I mentioned, dividends from shares that also rent from property would be some examples there. And then there's any other income if you've got any other sorts of awards or scholarships. But when we're preparing budgets, although looking at your money in could be quite straightforward if you're just on wages, for example, and you don't have other sorts of income to worry about, you still need to consider how often you receive this income because you want to work out, are you going to do a weekly budget, fortnightly, monthly, or annually? And for some people, it might be that you want a weekly budget, but then you can also work out, well, what does that look like over a whole year? And I do recommend that you look at what that means for a whole year because sometimes things that you think you're not spending much on, when you add it up over a whole year and you see just how much it is, you might actually think differently about spending that money. You might prefer to maybe save some of it. So when we're doing this budget, we are using the income that you receive after tax in your budget. So are there any questions on that before we move along? Another thing to think about when you're doing a budget is, are you doing a budget just for you? Are you doing a family budget for the whole family where you've got other income and expenses to include as well? So we can make the budgeting process a little bit more complex as we go along. But for now, we just look at an individual putting a budget together. All right, so let's have a look at money out. Now, we've talked a lot, and Xiao has put in there also about thinking about wants and needs. Um, needs. So needs are the things that you really can't go without. So your food, water, housing, electricity, they're the sorts of things that we classify as real needs. So we need to give a priority to ensuring that we have those needs covered. Then we have our wants, things that we might enjoy spending our money on, but are not essential. So that's much easier when we're going through the budget if we're trying to find some savings in our budget where we might think there's some spending leaks. We can look through what the items that are wants. So it could be things like eating out or takeaway or movies, or it could even be different subscriptions that you might have, music or TV subscriptions, for example. So they're just some things that you can think about whether you want to keep them or not. Then we actually look at categorizing your expenses. And there are different ways that you can actually do this. For example, some people might want to categorize them in these sorts of categories that I have here, whereas other people might not want as many categories. They might want to have fewer categories than that. But these are the typical categories that we do consider. And by starting with a longer list of categories, it ensures that you haven't left anything out of your expenditure. So you can see there things like housing, groceries, utilities are pretty much your needs. Then transport, because obviously, you do need transport most people need to travel to their job to earn an income. So transport can become very important. And even though I haven't got phone and internet up there with needs, it's probably becoming more of a need these days. But I suppose it just depends on, you don't need the latest phone. You maybe don't need the fastest internet. That's probably a little bit more of a luxury. So that does cross over between needs and wants. The same with health. So having health insurance can be something very important for your own financial well-being as well as your overall well-being. We don't want not being able to access various health, having your health. So if you need to see a dentist, you don't want to be struggling with finding the money to go and see the dentist, and then your health is affected. So having health insurance is a really important one here too, but this all depends on your budget as well. And then things like education, entertainment, sport, which is related to your health as well, and gifts. So some people like to spend a lot on gifts, or you might have some big like weddings, that, for example, or big birthdays coming up, or other things that you're thinking you might need to spend a lot on gifts. So that might also become a goal in the future. So yes, think about how much of your spending is on needs and how much is on wants. And, being aware of it can really help you in budgeting for the future. There's always a trade-off. Would you perhaps be better reducing some of your spending on wants and having more to save or invest for your future? And everyone has different wants, and some people find it easier and others harder to reduce spending on some more than others. But something that's really helpful here, and I encourage you all to do this after today's webinar is finished, is whether you have an app on your phone or just a little notebook somewhere, or even using the notes in your phone, track every dollar of where your money goes, every single dollar, because there are a lot of spending leaks that you probably don't realize you have. You just you miss them because you don't think it's very much, but it's really eye-opening if you track every dollar of where your money's going. So doing that over a month, for example, and I mean, there's a lot of apps that you can do that just on your phone, but you don't have to, use technology. You can always just jot it down as you go, keeping a little notebook. And when you track your spending, you really do become very aware of where your money is going and how much everything costs as well, because this is the thing, we're going to start looking at building a budget today, and I'm hoping you can get started on your own. But why a lot of people don't finish doing a budget is because they don't make the time to actually look at how much they're actually spending on things. You need to look a little bit at your past history in order to plan moving forward. So you can even keep a note in your little diary. If you've got a diary, just pop it in there. But every single thing needs to be recorded. And it should include also your take-home pay. So you might want to keep a record of that because sometimes it can change, and any other, income that you might receive. And then you've got your living expenses. And although it's great to feel like you've got enough money to pay all your bills on time with some left over for emergencies, most people do want to look forward to something later. So it can help to have a goal so that you can actually work out what your savings each week is required to reach that goal. Okay, so I think that might be it for money out. But also when we are looking at some of these expenses, not only are we tracking how much you're spending on these things, but even for your needs, things like electricity and gas and water. Water, I suppose a lot of your bill for water is actually spent on actually just having it connected. It's the actual cost of water itself isn't that high, and you can't really negotiate that. But your electricity and gas, your phone and your internet, for example, health insurance, some of these things that are really essential. Even if you've got a mortgage, you've got, interest rates, you can start shopping around. So although we're going to build it into the budget, you might want to start shopping around to see if you can get it cheaper somewhere else so that you've got even a little bit more left over, because every single dollar counts. And many people are surprised once they find out exactly where all their money's going and how much those little things can add up. All right, I'll just leave it there for a minute. Is there anything else? Yes, people's priorities are different. That's right. There's no right or wrong in terms of priorities. Everybody is very different. And regardless of those, your budget can really help. Okay, so let's have a look at some budgeting tips. All right, so when you're looking at your money in, you want to make sure that you're using the amount that you receive after tax and any other deductions. So whatever is going into your bank account, and don't forget to include any other income from other sources. Another budgeting tip. So I suppose this is where people start to worry about the maths side of things, okay? We need to compare apples with apples and oranges with oranges. So we need the same time period for your income and expenses. If you're getting paid fortnightly, then you need to ensure that the expenses are also worked out. How much is that fortnightly? And of course, we don't pay for all of our bills the same way that we earn our income. So a lot of bills we earn quarterly, for example. So every 3 months, we receive an electricity bill. So this is where some of the maths comes in, but I'm going to show you a way to make this really easy in a moment. But of course, you need to be able to then work out if that's for a quarter, well, how much will that be per week or per fortnight or per month, for example. So there will be some little calculations that you'll need to do. Then we're looking at the money out. So when you're splitting your expenses, the first thing is we want to be able to split it between needs and wants so that when you are looking to where you can save more, you know you can look at the wants. And you know just how much as a proportion of your income that is needed for your needs. And another thing that's really helpful when you're doing your budget, a lot of people like to be able to categorize the different parts of their budget to help them stick to their budget as well. So you might have separate bank accounts for the different purposes in your budget if you haven't already. So, and I know you also might want to shop around with your bank accounts. So, some banks might not charge fees on certain bank accounts. So, and they may let you open multiple accounts without charging you any fees. So that's another thing to look at. But also, if you've got separate bank accounts, say you've got a bills account for regular bills, so that might be for like your rent or mortgage, electricity, water, and your needs, then you might have a transaction account for the things that you sort of might spend more regularly, like day to day, or even like your groceries and things like that. And then you might also have a savings account. So then when you've got your budget, you can work out how much is going to go into each account, and that might help you stick to your budget. But when you're looking at those separate bank accounts, it's also important to look at how you set that bank account up. So if you've got a bills account or a transaction account for everyday expenses, you don't want an account that's going to charge you based on a number of transactions that you have. So you want that to be fee-free. And it might not be so important to worry about what sort of interest rate you're earning on the money in those accounts because you're not going to have a huge amount in those accounts. You want something that you can just use easily, regularly, and not have to pay fees on every time you have those transactions. Whereas your savings account, you might be looking for a different type of account because that's where the interest rate might become more important. You might want to find a savings account that rewards you for your savings and that discourages you from withdrawing money from the savings account. So some savings accounts pay you bonus interest at the end of each month if you've saved a certain and regular amount and have not made any withdrawals. So that can be something else to consider. And also having a savings account harder to access where maybe you can't access it with your normal transaction card. So things like that are other things to take into consideration when you know your own sort of financial behavior as well and what might work for you. All right. Is there anything that anyone wants to add at this point? I wonder, do any of you currently have different bank accounts for different things like I just mentioned?
Yes, I do have because we organized from different banks for various things and chop and change from the banks who gives a little bit more interest and things like that. So between Westpac and some other banks we used to do because in addition to salary we do a little bit of share. So keeping it like that. Actually, my husband organized all these things and he got a old-fashioned method, writing down in the notebook and managing every day a little bit like that. So he found that is really useful to manage that way.
Yes, no, very good. And I think also when you're looking at different accounts, you might even have more. Some people I know have more bank accounts than what's there. But also when you are in a relationship with someone, there's actually starting to be a lot more academic research coming out about this now. And something recently published, like just in the last month, actually shows how your relationship can be impacted by how you save. And so they've done a little bit of study into different couples and how that has impacted on the relationship. And you probably can know from your own experiences how that might work out. I mean, it's limited to the sample that they had. But it's something that there's not a right or wrong way. There's so many different ways that you can manage your finances when you are in a relationship with someone. So some people like to put all of their income all combined into the same account, whereas others like to have part of their income going into a joint account and some of it into their own account. And then with expenses, same thing. They might have all of their everyday expenses come out of the joint account that both their income is going into. Whereas others might have one member of the relationship who organises to pay all the bills from one account, and then maybe each independent person has their own everyday account for their everyday expenses, and they know what their budget is, and they do it that way. So I think that's probably for another session though, because this is where we could spend such a long time looking at different models of how you might share your finances. But today we're just looking at the budgeting basics, and then I suppose it's up to you and your, if you're in a relationship, your partner, to work out what's going to work best for you. But it could be very difficult if you don't have a budget to start with. So I think that's the most important thing, is starting with the budget.
So what I was trying to tell is that we got a joint account. Account is one, but as joint account, we got in multiple banks, like how to move from one to another so that which one is better for us, sort of thing. We always manage it from one account, but then you subdivide.
Yes, yes. And look, you do have to keep shopping around. It's really important. So that's another thing to think about when you do have your savings goals as well. And this Christmas account, some people like to also have split their savings into different types of savings. So some banks actually offer Christmas account where, once again, you get some bonuses if you don't withdraw throughout the whole year, and you can save for, the big event at the end of the year if you've got children, and presents and things that you'd like to buy for them, or a lot of food that you need to buy because you're having family celebrations. So that's something else that we could think about there. So we're going to have a little look at an example of building a budget, just very basic budget here. So
It's breaking in between, or is it just me? Anybody else feels that breaking in? Are you all, can you all hear properly?
Yes.
Thanks. It could be my computer. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. So yes, we're looking at a worked example of a budget now. We're looking at Jan earning $55,000 after tax, okay? And she has a total expenses of $4,350, and I should have put per month, okay? Per month, which is outlined here. And you can see there all the different things that the money is being spent on. The items with a little star next to them identify those that we would think are more needs rather than wants. I mean, I haven't got clothes with an asterisk. Of course, we need clothes, but we don't necessarily need to continually be purchasing new clothes. And I mean, this depends on different circumstances, of course. And with children, they're growing, so that would be very different. But in this instance, we can see that most of Jan's money is spent on housing. So she's paying rent of $2,400 a month, and then groceries, and then electricity and gas, water, and then she spends some money on transport, public transport as well. And then we've got a phone, internet. She's got insurance for her contents in her home that she's renting, and she pays for health insurance. And then we've got there some of her other things that she's been spending her money on, and that is per month. And you can see she does spend out of her wants $300 a month on entertainment, $150 a month on lunches, and then you've got some other smaller expenses per month there. So what we will now do, I mean, this can take a while, all right, before I get to the next slide. So this is here, we've already got her money in $55,000 after tax. But when we're looking at these expenses, we've worked them out per month. So this is something that you might want to think about going and looking at your records so that you can work out, well, what sorts of expenses would you have? And then working out, say, a monthly amount, or if you would prefer to do weekly or fortnightly, just ensuring that we also adjust everyone accordingly. So let's just have another look here. We're following the 6-step budget process. We can see her money in of $55,000 per year. We need to convert that to a per month so that we're comparing her per month income with her per month expenses. So that's just $55,000 divided by 12 months. Now I've highlighted in green the needs and in yellow the wants. So we've worked out her needs are $3,745 per month. So she's got a little bit of room once she's covered those financial commitments. And then her wants, she spends $605 a month. Now at this stage, we haven't put any of Jan's financial goals in here. We're just going to look at whether she has a surplus or deficit. So a surplus, having more money coming in than going out at the end of the month, or does she have less money coming in than going out, which would mean we would definitely need to reduce some sort of expenses so that she doesn't get herself into any financial trouble. With the 6th step, we're reviewing the budget each month, so just making any changes because things can change a little bit, and just making sure that it is accurate and that we're able to stick to the budget. So are there any questions before I go to the next stage? Does that all make sense to you so far? And of course, this isn't exhaustive. This is just an example with Jan. You may have many other expenses that are not listed there. Okay, good. It all makes sense.
A lot of thumbs ups, no questions.
That's really good. Okay, so what are the budget tools that we have to use? Well, some of you might just want to use a notepad, pen and a calculator, or you might use a calculator on your phone if you don't have a calculator. And then we've got budgeting tools and apps from the App Store. And even your bank can provide you with a whole lot of budgeting tools and apps. So these are things that you can look at in your own time. It is something to consider, but also just a word of warning in terms of what budgeting apps or tools you might choose, just to ensure that it is from, a source that would have all the necessary checks and balances to protect your data. Like even though it's these budgeting tools, you're putting in figures, they might not mean much to other people, but you do want to make sure that your data is being protected. So just keep an eye out for how you might be using those and maybe look at some of the terms and conditions. But a free, easy-to-use budget tool is provided by Moneysmart. So Moneysmart is a website that has been put together by the Australian Securities Investments Commission of the government to help people with their financial literacy more broadly. And I know we discussed some other things earlier. We talked about investments, for example. Moneysmart site has some great information to get you started with investing as well. This information on Moneysmart is very reliable and can be trusted. So it is a good place to start. And I have put a link up there for the budget planner. I think maybe even might try to, in a moment, I'll exit the presentation and I might actually pop that in the link in the chat for you so that you can use that while we go through building a budget today. You can also, if you like, you can use a spreadsheet. You can get lovely graphs and things from spreadsheets, and you can set it up exactly how you like if that's something that you think you'd like to do. There's also a spreadsheet and Microsoft Excel file that Moneysmart provides on their website that you can actually download, and it looks like this. The spreadsheet actually looks like this. All right, so this is, and I will put that link in just a moment for you that you can use and have a look at the website yourself. But if we're doing Jan's budget, just go through a little bit of what it might look like. So we would put Jan's take-home pay, and you can see this is the Moneysmart one, your take-home pay, you pop that in, $55,000. And you've got this view up the top here. So what the on the Moneysmart website, it can be adjusted so you can keep changing this from annually to monthly to weekly, fortnightly, what have you. And you can see here, although we're only looking at an individual this time, if you do have a partner, you can use this budget to include their income as well. And then we've got, I've just put in here the other amounts that we had for Jan's budget, and we pop that in, and you can see how you put the frequency. So you don't even have to work it out yourself. If you know that it's monthly and you pop it in monthly, you can click on it and it'll convert it all for you as long as you enter it in the right way. So you can see all of the other items that are being entered in there. We've got electricity and water, internet, pay TV, mobile, and those sorts of things. So that's all in there. We've entered it as a monthly amount. And there's some more there. Pops them all in there. And then it gives you a summary. So you don't have to work it out. It will give you the figure yourself, and it tells you, or it tells us here, that Jan is in surplus by $2,800 per year. That amount is. We have a look back. Let me just check. So that's the annual amount here. So we're putting in amounts on this side of the budget, but then we've put a view in, and I can go through this in a moment on a live version, but per year it actually shows you what all these things add up to. So you can see how quickly some of these things add up. Okay. And this is where it can be a little bit surprising. And I know some of these figures might not look realistic. It's just an example. You can see even here on public transport, it's quite a large number when you look at it per year. Bars and clubs or entertainment going out, $3,600 per year. Lunches bought. So you might think, oh, $150 a month, maybe that's okay. But over a year, $1,800, well, that's actually, a fairly decent amount, isn't it? And coffee and tea, $720. If you combine that, that's $2,500 right there. So it's just something to help when you look at it annually. It can give you a different perspective. So we can see that her budget's in surplus, but, that's not really a very big surplus when you consider it's over a whole year. If one little thing changes, let's just say, even though Jan has got her health insurance, let's say, but let's say she's got to cover a gap somewhere for that health insurance. That can, slowly take away from any surplus that she might have. So it might be helpful to actually look at reducing some of those wants. If Jan thinks that that's a possibility for her, that might be something she wants to consider. That's just a little example there. All right. Let's go to the next slide. Just see what I've got there. Okay, so when we're looking at your income for different time periods, I know this is very basic, but just as a reminder, 52 weeks in a year. So you can divide, if you know your annual income after tax, you can divide it by 52. Or if you've got your weekly income and you want it to be your annual, we multiply it by 52, 26 fortnights in a year. So same thing applies there, but we use 26, 12 months in a year. But also remember that although there's 26 fortnights in a year and 12 months in a year, some people assume that there is 4 weeks to every month, but that's not the case. So just don't get caught out there. So yes, there's not an even number of fortnights per month. So some months have 4 weeks, others have 5. And if you get paid monthly, you just have to make sure that you work it out with by multiplying it and working out an annual income first and then dividing that by 26. So let's have a look at you building your own budget. So if we're looking at these steps, consider how you might work out your own budget. So I'm just going to stop there for a moment. And I might even stop sharing my screen and show you the online option for this as well. Would everyone like me to do that? And I can pop the link in there for you in case you want to use the Moneysmart site. It might be helpful. Okay, we'll do that. Okay, so you might want to click on that link and give you a couple of minutes to do that. All right, so you can see here that there's an Excel spreadsheet if you want to actually use the Excel spreadsheet, or you can use it just here. You can see you can have all these different views. And so it's probably easiest for you to use a weekly budget, put in your take-home pay per week, and then any other income that you might have. But if you do get paid fortnightly, you just say, let's say you get paid, let's just say $500 a week, just to make it easy, you can pop that there. And your view is weekly. I'll just show you how that works. So if you wanted to have a look what that is monthly, it changes it for you. So it's very helpful. If you know that you get paid fortnightly, it's easier for you to put your fortnightly pay in. You can do that and click on fortnightly. And then your view, once again, will tell you how much that is per month, or if you want to know annually, it shows you that's $26,000 per year. Remembering this is your take-home pay, so you'll pay after tax. And then we can work through here. Oh, great. At the moment, we're in surplus. But then this is where we can start putting other items in. So the categories are already there for you. Makes it so much easier to use. But remember that you building your budget now is going to be very helpful, but you also need to start tracking your expenses for the next month so that you can see how accurate some of these amounts are. Like some of them you can get from your bills, so that would be easy. But some of your other expenses, if we're looking at things like here, entertainment and eating out, you probably don't have very clear records of how much you spend on all of those items. So another idea could be that you download the spreadsheet from here, and where those categories are, you could start using those same categories in the spreadsheet to track your expenditure for each day and then add it up at the end. Right, so how are you all going with that? Did anyone, just so that I have a bit of an idea, has anybody managed to log in?
Going good. Yeah, there are thumbs ups logged in, but this will stay. We can continuously use.
Sorry, what was that? You can continually use. Yes.
Yeah,
So,
we can use it. I mean, we can download the spreadsheet and then or use directly this online one.
yeah,
Then
so
and keep it as ours personally, because I logged in and gave my name, just their rename there.
yes.
So it's my planner now.
Yes, that's right. So you can see here,
Yeah.
you've got all of these other things that you can do. Yeah, and there's further information here, but you can see it's got this auto save.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so you can just use this and it will auto save your information, but you might lose it if you change your device. Whereas what you can do, so I just used this example, it's just really quick and easy, right? I mean, even for your kids, they could go in and do this and play around with it to see, like they could put their pocket money in and the sorts of things they spend their money on. And in fact, when we were talking about children, it is helpful to include children in your budgeting as well. Like you could have a special day. It could be like a long weekend, for example, if you don't go away, or just pick a special day in the year and you say that, or a weekend, this is your family's budget day. And you can talk all things budget, put budgets together and involve the kids in, maybe setting goals for the future and things like that. If maybe there's a hot family holiday to take, and get them all involved, get the kids looking around for better prices on things as well, depending on the age of your children. So, you could have them helping hunt around for different, if they've got school clothes, for example, or computers that they need for school, those sorts of things. Get them to help hunt around for the best price as well, or work out how much they are and then how much needs to be saved and how long it will take. So that's the online version, but I'll just click on the Excel spreadsheet. Actually, I think I already had one. Let me just, I do already have one open. I'll just stop sharing. Oh, let's see what happens. Yeah. Click on that. Yes, so you can see the download pops up here, and then we can open that up. Hopefully you can still see that all on the screen there. All right, so for me, that's not going to show on the screen, so I'll have to just stop sharing for a minute. So this is what it looks like as a spreadsheet. So it looks nice and easy, doesn't look scary. Used
That looks neat.
yeah, lots of white space. So not like when you see all the cells when you open up Excel, and then people who don't like maths start to panic, or who haven't used spreadsheets before, and then they quickly exit. This is presented in a really easy to use layout, just like it was on the website here, where you can enter things in. So to show you again, if I was to enter an amount there, yeah, it still has that view. We want to look at it monthly. You can see it just changes those figures for you. Okay, so we might start working through that together if you like. So if you want to work out your income and pop that in first, that's our very first step. And if you don't have the spreadsheet or the online, maybe just a piece of paper in front of you, or even on your phone in your notes, you can start popping some things in there. But probably, yeah, if you don't have the spreadsheet or the online version, I would say notes, pen and paper would probably be the best thing to use for now. So what is your money in, your take-home pay? You might even have to quickly check your bank account, how much goes into your bank account, or your pay slip, what is your take-home pay? And then if you do know, and some of this you might want to do, like finish it off later, but if you know roughly, if you've got interest that you're earning from a bank account or other sorts of investments, or if you're receiving other sorts of benefits and you know how much they are, you can pop those in there. So that will give us a bit of a start. Even if you have different frequencies, you can enter in what you know. So let's say you know how much you get from income and savings annually, let's just say, you can pop that in there and it will do all the conversions for you. So let's just say that was $500 annually, just to make it easy. You can see it's still $500 here. But now if we want to change that, you can see if you put it in wrong, it's going to come out wrong over here. So just make sure that the frequency that you receive it or pay it for your expenses is correct. All right, so then let's work out the money out. Now that's probably what takes the longest amount of time to work out. And this is where people tend to give up. But I encourage you, please, please do not give up. And I know you won't have all of this in front of you now, but maybe just have a go at just estimating what you think it is. And then you can go and have a look at what they actually are later. So your mortgage and rent, I might make this a little bit more realistic. Let me just put in some figures here. Okay, so let's say, you might even be sharing the house with someone. Let's see how much you might want to put there for rent, let's say per week. And that's probably much higher for a lot of people, but I'm just going to put an amount there. If you pay a mortgage, you're probably also going to have to pay council rates, or if you've got an apartment, you'd have body corporate fees. What about furniture and appliances? See, this is something, if you didn't see that category, you probably wouldn't put an amount there. But you do spend money on furniture and appliances. How much? How much would you spend on that per year? So pop an amount in there. Any renovations and maintenance? And just make sure you've got the right frequency here. So if you own your home, or even if you're renting, you might spend money on maintaining that. Let's just say that you maybe per year you might, I don't know, repaint the room or something like that. Let's just say your electricity. So you've got that already quarterly. You can enter that in, so that makes that a bit easier. And so hopefully you're working through, as I'm working through these as well. Anyone got anything they'd like to add at this stage? How are you going?
Going good. And it's very easy to add. That's what I felt in the spreadsheet.
Yes, especially because you don't have to get your calculator and work all these out yourself. I think that's really helpful. But that's where this view will help. So you might want to even do you could do an extra tab if you wanted and copy it. So, oops, sorry. You can easily copy that to a new tab if you wanted. You could use it.
This is such a great tool, and I wish that all students should get some kind of, from their, in their pack, their link to this tool or something.
Yeah.
It has been included, or any thoughts on that?
Well, in fact, in the United States, there's been a huge push for students to actually be learning in high school more about budgeting and personal finance. And what they've done is actually in some states, they've made personal finance a compulsory subject in high school, a standalone subject. And that's slowly rolling out to more and more states in the United States. In Australia, there's also been a push to do the same. Although financial literacy is included in the curriculum, it's not, its own standalone subject. It's part of other subjects that students do. And also at university, there's been a push for students to have to do a personal finance course. But of course, that makes it a bit tricky when education isn't free, because people are having to pay to do that course. But that's why we've got our personal finance basics micro-credentials. So that's something for staff and students. It's actually free to do that. For non-staff, because you have to use your Western Sydney email account to get free access. If you are not staff or student, I think it's around $70. So it's still fairly reasonable. And the university's been good in, like, normally these micro-credentials would be upwards from $500. But because of the topic, the university has been really good in keeping that amount down. But look, I notice we've got a comment there. I'm in the red. Better get the dog in a TV so he stops freeloading. Yes, that's one thing, like with groceries too, pet food. I like that pet food's separate, because I know when I had my three children when they were very young, and we also had pets. I remember thinking, wow, this is costing a lot, not just for food for the kids, but also for the pets. So yeah, it's great when you can see where your money's going. I'm sorry, I've been a bit slow, so I've been talking here, but I'll put a few other things in here just to see how it might work out. All right, let's just see what happens here. Oh, I've put $200 a week on pet food. No, that's probably a little bit much. All right. And then we've got our entertainment and eating out. Oh, and this is the other thing. How many of you actually have a membership to a gym? Any of you have a membership?
And not me. I find my own way to exercise. Some equipments we got for home. That's cheaper.
Because this is one that you might find if you, I don't know how much you pay. Let's just say it's 120 a month just for fun. All right. And if you're using it, fantastic. That's really good because that's the only reason to have this membership at a gym is to actually use it. If you're not using it, maybe that's something you need to give away. And yeah, maybe there's something else. Maybe you can, well, for me, I know I joined a gym many years ago and went once and I had to change what I was doing. So have someone that goes with you or join a sport where you're part of the team. So your team encourages you to be there because they need you. Gets you out. Maybe you want to be outdoors rather than indoors. Okay, so someone has two gym memberships, fantastic. But yes, if you use one, that's great. The other one, maybe you don't have the membership. Maybe you just pay as you go. That's another option. Although it might seem more expensive, it might not be if you're not actually using it all the time. So yeah, and like a coffee and tea, if you're buying a coffee a day, what's that, $35 a week already? And then a lot of these things also add up. All right, and then we've got transport. Look, I haven't even finished, and I'm already spending more than I earn in my fictional example here. I'm glad this one's fictional because that's a huge amount. I haven't even finished entering everything. But how good is this spreadsheet where it even gives you a graph so you can see where your money's going? Really, really helpful. But I mean, I haven't spent very long popping those figures in. It's going to take you a little bit longer to put all of your figures in there. And of course, I encourage you to play around with it a lot more after today's session. But yeah, it's a really good start. And if you are in the red, yeah, let's have a look. How can we then reduce some of that expenditure? So I'll come back to my slides in a moment. But what we tend to then do is then look at, okay, where is it all being spent? And you'll probably find that you're even more in the red once you start tracking your actual expenses. But then, all right, let's look at, well, what are needs, what are wants? Where can you maybe reduce some of your expenditure? And another option is, how can you increase your income as well? Maybe that's something else to look at if you really can't find ways to reduce your expenditure. And I know it's easier said than done, but once you've got it all here in your budget planner, at least you know where you're at and you can start thinking about some different strategies that you might take. All right. Oh, so I've noticed better get the dog, yes, in the TV ad. Well, that will get you some more income, wouldn't it? Which would be great. Okay, so you can keep your screen open if you like. Before I put my other one up, are there any comments anyone wants to make so far? Just starting to look at putting your own budget together.
Hello.
I was thinking about for the want and needs, for needs, I feel like for me, I try to organize the want. Like for example, if my budget is tight, um, I probably wouldn't ask others to do, for example, pet care, like washing, grooming. I just do it myself. Yeah. It probably also can also give me some entertainment as well because it's happiness is another cost, I think. Yeah, so I will try to do this way. Just win-win. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a very good idea. But I mean, also to do some of that yourself, I suppose you need to budget for, you might need to buy a few grooming tools, for example, just to help you with that if you don't already have them. But yeah, that can save a lot of money. I know grooming, that's the same.
Yeah, that's
They're really expensive. Yeah. But yeah, I like the entertainment value for that one. Yeah, and time versus dollars. That's really important. When I put those photos up before about what money means to you, um, or don't know if that was the exact question, but images around how your finances currently are. But the hourglass could also represent time, and this is the thing, right? Time is money. So what things are better to pay other people to do, but what things maybe shouldn't you be paying other people to do? And yeah, and how if you're given an opportunity to earn extra money, extra income, you've got to weigh up, well, the time that you would give up to earn that extra money, is that going to cost you more down the track because you might have extra costs like your transport or childcare, or maybe you're not eating, maybe you get takeaway because you don't have enough time to cook and then that costs more money. So a whole lot of other things to think about with that. But yeah, a lot of it comes down to time versus dollars. And that's what our studies have shown as well. But money can also buy you time, right? Money can buy you time with your family to have holidays and have great experiences as well.
Yeah, all this relates to cost benefit analysis, working in your mind that where you are gaining something when you are doing this exercise. So it's kind of give take kind of thinking, and you work what works best for you, opt what works best for you.
Well, that's right. Yes. And I mean, even thinking about how much you earn per day or per hour, for example. And when you're spending your money, thinking, oh, well, I had to work 2 days to buy that appliance or go out for dinner or whatever it might be. How long do you have to work? And sort of equate it that way. It can sometimes just help put things in perspective a little bit. But, we also have times where, with special occasions and things like that, yeah, you do have to have that trade-off. All right, well, I'll just go back to my presentation slides. And you can see here, just going back to the steps that we were talking about as part of the budgeting process there. So we've worked out our total income, put that in, worked out the money out, tried to estimate our expenses for the different things, but we haven't talked about our financial goals. So what are the financial goals that you might want to achieve? And did any of you put anything in your budget for that? So what we would do in this example would then estimate how much the financial goal would cost, and then we can work backwards from there depending on how much you might have available to save for that particular goal. Did anybody want to share a goal that they have?
Too many. Okay.
Or maybe just pick one to start with and see how we go with that. So there might be a goal that for in the next year, for example. So maybe think of one of those goals. Yeah, so the longer term, absolutely, like retiring, saving for a home deposit, like there's some really big goals there. So this is where starting with the budget can then be expanded to thinking about these other things that we would like for ourselves. But we need to get the budget right first before we can move on to those other goals. And even if you were to see a financial advisor, for example, they're going to try and get your budget worked out first because they need to know where your money is coming from and going before they can make any recommendations to you. And this is where they might start looking at your superannuation. I mean, if you're working, you've got your money going into superannuation for compulsory super, but you might not know exactly how it's invested. Maybe it's not invested the best way for you or in the best fund. So these are other things that then can be looked at, but then perhaps you might want to be making additional contributions to super. That might be an option where you make your own contributions to build your superannuation up for when you retire. So then that would become part of your, and money going out in your budget if you were to do that. And that's going to be pointed towards your goal for retirement. Knowing that in retirement, once you reach 60 and if you retire, you're able to access your superannuation and it is tax-free. So that's something else to think about. Saving for a home deposit, there are a lot of different ways that you might want to do that as well. And even superannuation is available as a vehicle for saving for a home deposit if it's your first home. So that's another thing that you could then start looking at, well, is that the better way to save, or are you going to put it into a high interest savings account? So things like that can be really helpful. But you need to know where your money is going first and how much you have available for these items. And there may be other goals that you have. So I know that you might still be working on your budget, but what's the easiest part and what's the most challenging? Have we got anyone wanting to comment on that part? What was the easiest part? Or even is it what have you learnt so far today just from using this online budget tool and hearing about some of the things we've discussed? Has it been helpful at all? And if it hasn't, that's okay. How can we make it helpful?
Meritia commented that she wanted to retire before she's dead. And Anisa says saving for a home deposit. That's the aim.
Yes. Well, hopefully you have found it fairly easy to build a budget using this tool. And I really would encourage you to continue with those items. And if you don't have access to the tool or you're not able to use a spreadsheet, even just noting these things down like your income and your expenses and adding them up, I think that you'll really find that an eye-opener. And I can see here, all right, so if your situation changes all the time, it's hard to manage around those changes. Yes, yes, absolutely. And this is why we need to sort of be continually reviewing the budget. That step 6 is to monitor and review so that we can maybe update it based on those changes. But I know from people who have irregular income, particularly people who work for themselves, it is really challenging to do this. But it's also important though, so that you know how much do you need for your necessities. So you actually,
And if they lose job in between, that is a critical situation. And then we have the big example of having COVID and people having a lot of upset that time. Then
yes,
they had a regular income, but suddenly, for example, reset West End, so many people lost their jobs. Things like that, unexpected, can happen. But this budgeting will help for that type of thing. If something happens, how we can manage.
well, that's right. I mean, I've covered here around if you've got a budget surplus and looking at reaching a goal and that sort of thing. But also, if you don't have enough money, if you are in the red, there are a few other things that we can do, and we talked about increasing income, decreasing expenses, but we'll get to item 3 in just a moment. I can see that there are some more comments, which I'll look at in just a second. But adjusting debt payments as well is an option. So if you do find that you've got that irregular income and all of a sudden you can't pay your bills, most utility companies, you can call them and ask for a payment plan in the first instance, and they will extend your due date and you can pay those bills off. But of course, this is only a short-term strategy. But there's also other ways of reducing your debt. For example, you can call the National Debt Helpline as well, and they can help you if you're having any problems. They can help you to negotiate a payment plan with anyone that you owe money to, who are called creditors. Or you might need to, if you've got a lot of debts, for example, you may need to look at consolidating those debts and refinancing with maybe a longer term, and you can also renegotiate any other fees and things that you may have to pay at that particular time. So yeah, there are some strategies to look at there. So I can see what are the pros and cons of using a paid budgeting system, like a system called You Need a Budget. I think that's what it is, YNAB. Look, I haven't personally used any of these systems before. I think they still do cost money. Obviously, they need to make money as well. For some people, they might need to do that if they really can't manage themselves. If they find it difficult to be making sure bills are paid on time and all of those sorts of things. Although it should be, once you've done a budget, but like the paid budgeting system actually does your budget and then automatically ensures that bills are paid when they need to be paid and that sort of thing. But you can set a lot of that up now anyway. And I mean, I used to always receive paper statements and opted to receive paper statements because that's what I prefer. But even now I'm finding that I don't even have an option. It's all electronic. And you can organise to have your bills paid out of your account automatically. But at the end of the day, you still need to have your money going into the right accounts. So you need to budget for it so that the money is there. But I can't probably give you a big list of the pros and cons of one of these systems because I'd need to look into it a little bit further. I know that they exist, but I don't know a lot of detail about them. Yes, so I'm glad you've read Barefoot Investor. Very good. Yes, setting up an account for unexpected disasters is great. So when we're looking at your budget and we're looking at savings, if you had a surplus, if you don't already have an emergency savings account, that might be your first goal, is to set up an emergency savings account. So yes, with your savings, you may have multiple savings accounts for different things. And the emergency savings account, very important. It's estimated that you should have equivalent to, and I know this might sound really huge for some of you, but it's something to work towards, around 3 months as a minimum of your income needs to be in that savings account. So if you earn $4,000 a month, you need a savings account of about $12,000 for unexpected disasters. So that would be, gives you long enough to find your feet if you were to lose your job or something were to happen. So that's something to think about, trying to put money aside for that emergency savings account, but also finding like you're hoping you're not going to have to use it. So maybe finding a high interest bearing account so that you could be earning interest on that at the same time. But it also needs to be accessible depending on how good you are restricting your spending. You need to be able to access an emergency account fairly quickly, but you don't want to be using it for anything else. You have to pretend it's not there. Once you've got those savings, leave them there. And it does give you peace of mind knowing then that you've got an account there if you do need it. But some people don't have enough surplus to even be putting money aside for that emergency account. Even if you put smaller amounts aside, it can be really helpful. But we've got in Australia, as I mentioned, and I think I've got it on a slide in a moment, I'll pop it up. The National Debt Helpline in Australia can help you if you are really struggling in meeting your needs with your income, just meeting your needs. And in that case, if you're someone in that situation, you might find that if something does go wrong, it might be that your fridge breaks down, for example. Um, you also might need to access some funds in that sort of an emergency. So that's where they may want to refer you to a no interest loan called NILS, NILS. Um, and that also allows you to borrow money free of interest if you are in a dire financial situation. So it's just something else to think about. It is available. We have people in a lot of different circumstances. So I'll actually pop that up now. So this is the National Debt Helpline here. And you have, there's free financial counsellors. They're not financial advisors, they're financial counsellors, which in Australia tend to help you more with immediate needs and making sure that you're paying your debts when they're due. Okay, so there are some serious steps that you can take, as we mentioned before, that I have. You can have a debt agreement with, anyone that you may owe money to, for example. You might even need to consider bankruptcy if you just cannot find a way to meet all of your debts. But once again, the Moneysmart site has a lot of information around that. Okay, so I will take any more questions. We've got a little bit of time, about 10 minutes, I think, still left for that. So any questions and further discussion, we will be able to spend some time on that now. And of course, we've got more workshops coming up. So next week, we've got your financial well-being, and we'll be doing a financial health check. So just the different sorts of things that you need to be thinking about other than budgeting. And then your financial vision and planning for your future. So when we were talking about goals, if you've done your budget, you've got a financial health check, you might then start to think about, well, what sorts of things could motivate you to save for the future and plan for the future. And we'll look at using the idea of a financial vision board to help you do that. So I'll stop sharing that now.
So I have popped the information hub. It is in the chat about workshop 2 and workshop 3. Our link. Yeah, the link is given. So it's really, really useful. And the recording, I'll make sure that all of them, those who registered but couldn't attend due to various reasons, everybody gets a recording, as well as we will put it in our archived folder, archived web page, because I thought it's better, Michelle, we do all 3 together, right? Recording 1, 2, 3, because it makes sense, one after the other.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah,
and thank you for
we can share. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's great. And I mean, this was only budgeting basics, but a lot of the work really needs to happen, I suppose, with each individual. And, if you do need any help with preparing your budget, I'd be happy for you to reach out to me. I will put my email address in there for you. I'm sure that you'll be able to manage it, but if you do get stuck and you want some more help, I'm happy to provide you with that help. I mean, we could have a workshop and ask everyone to bring all their bills and everything with them, track your expenses for a month, come back in a month's time, and we'll do the budget. But I really hope that you've learnt something valuable. And if you have any more questions, you've still got a bit of time now. And I strongly encourage you to come along to the next workshop as well, where we can do a more holistic health check.
Thanks, everybody. Now you know where to reach Michelle. And it is so great to see everybody, and hope everybody use that Moneysmart website, because I'm so excited to see that. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
And thank you again to the Western Sydney University Library for allowing us to do this. I think it's a great initiative. So thank you.
Thanks. Okay, any more questions? There's a lot of thank yous coming.
And have you got people there in person? Did you have anyone there in person with questions?
Just one registered, but I left the door open and asked them to bring it to the room, but nobody has come. So I think people prefer online. I was expecting some kind of, some students here, but today being the first day of the autumn, maybe they are too busy.
That's right. Yes. Yes. We might be able to do something maybe another time as part of orientation. We could have a separate workshop.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking because students know as part of financial literacy, you were telling maybe some module or something compulsory that they could do. That will be great.
Yes.
Great tool.
All right. Well, thanks.
No questions, so we will wind up. And thank you, Michelle, and thank you, everybody. And see you next time. See you on next Monday.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.